Hi, I'm your host, Dave Kemp, and this is Future Ear Radio. Each episode, we're breaking down one new thing, one cool new finding that's happening in the world of hearables, the world of voice technology. How are these worlds starting to intersect? How are these worlds starting to collide? What cool things are going to come from this intersection of technology? Without further ado, let's get on with the show. Okay, so we are joined here today by two reoccurring guests, two awesome guests, Dr. Kim Cavitt and Mr. Geoff Cooling. Welcome back to the podcast. Why don't we go one by one, introducing ourselves, tell the audience a little bit about who you are and what you do. We'll start with you, Kim, ladies first.
Oh, thank you. I'm Kim Cavitt. I am an audiologist and I do consulting work in the hearing healthcare space from my office here in Chicago. I've been an audiologist for about 30 years. I've been in consulting about 20. Do a lot of work with the Academy of Doctors of Audiology, still teach in an AuD program at Northwestern, and I'm involved a little bit in the regulatory space because I am the chairman of the licensure board for the state of Illinois.
Lovely. Well, great to have you back on. Geoff, tell us a little bit about yourself.
I'm the irritating one, the Irish one.
The fun one.
Yeah.
I like fun instead.
My favorite Irishman.
I know.
So, qualified in 2006, 2007, was in private practice for years, and then went to work for a manufacturer. Went out on my own in 2014, doing consulting and stuff like that. And some locum, probably most famous for having a very big mouth. And I'm the co-editor of Hearing Aid Now, which is a consumer-focused site. And I've written, I suppose, some articles and strategy documents on a site called Just Audiology Stuff, which is more profession-focused. So that's me.
Awesome. Well, I'm so glad that you two joined me today because I've had some conversations on the podcast lately that I wanted to build upon today with you two. Going back with the conversation I had with like Abram Bailey and Steve Taddy, Andy Bellavia and Kat Penno, really talking about like, okay, there's a lot of change that's occurring in this hearing healthcare market. Some of it is kind of long overdue with the delay in the OTC legislation. And now we're seeing companies just basically saying, screw it, and bringing their products to market, even in this limbo period. But I think that there's just this kind of question mark of like, as this continues to change, where does the hearing professional like fit into this evolving market? And I think that, a lot of what we're seeing is probably going to be, with the more moderate to severe end, what I kind of think of as like the medical side, will probably stay somewhat similar. I'm not sure that there's this, what a lot of the change that's occurring right now is going to impact so much. What I really think is kind of happening is we're finally seeing this mild to moderate portion of the market, which we know to probably be pretty sizable, is really starting to appear to open up in terms of the different offerings and the access to those offerings becoming available. We're seeing, all kinds of new, like I talked about in the previous episode, Sonova buying Sennheiser. And, that kind of followed on the heels of not long ago, Oticon buying Philips. And so you see like, okay, so there's some jockeying happening here. And, so I think if we look at this new sort of portion of the market that's opening up and we operate off of the basis that, okay, historically, the hearing aid penetration rates and hearing aids being kind of the quintessential solution for hearing loss, it's been hovering around like 25% historically. That, these numbers kind of vary based on the source, but if you kind of average it out, it's probably somewhere in that ballpark. So about a fourth of people that should be treating their hearing loss are. And there's, probably a portion of those that even own hearing aids, how often they're even wearing them. So we've historically been plagued with this sort of status of there aren't enough people really treating and combating their hearing loss at scale. And so I think that what we're seeing with all of these moves that are taking place, with the sheer proliferation of AirPods and all of these new augmentation features that are being embedded. I just saw yesterday Qualcomm and Jacoti, now that partnership that was announced about 6 months ago, it's starting to come into fruition. There's a new, basically with Qualcomm's QC5100 chip, which powers a lot of hearable devices, is going to have the ability for those OEMs to basically flip a switch to turn on Jacoti's hearing augmentation. So you're going to have kind of like this basic level hearing augmentation. And so all of these things, if you kind of put all these pieces together, what we're looking at, it appears to be that we're about to see a lot of adoption in this mild to moderate market. And that's where I want to kick things off with you two, is to figure out, where does the audiologist, where does the hearing professional kind of fit into this market? And what are like the ways that we as an industry can start to kind of wrap our heads around like how we should be preparing and positioning ourselves? And what are the things that we shouldn't necessarily be thinking about? Like what are maybe the red herrings that we shouldn't be gravitating towards? So Kim, why don't I just kick things over to you and kind of get your thoughts on what's going on and kind of your overall take of like where things are headed?
I think you did a really good job of really outline what's going on from the hardware and device standpoint and where things are headed. From the provider standpoint, the solution is simple: practice audiology. I mean, that's really all you need to do. Your opportunities are in front of you. You just need to practice audiology and decouple your identity and your whole financial structure from the product and focus on what the service is. There's just so many opportunities out there. If you would just stop caring where the hearing aid came from and start focusing on providing the care that none of these entities will be able to provide at the level that you can provide it. But again, you've got to rethink who you are and what's important to you. And just, again, I tell people constantly, the key to the future of audiology is audiology.
Yeah.
So that it's really that simple.
Okay, we're going to definitely come back to this whole idea of double down on audiology, because we've talked about this a little bit on the podcast before, but I'm really excited because you just recently wrote a piece that we're going to go into that kind of details, like I think in specifics, what the opportunity kind of looks like. So before I do that, Geoff, I want to kick that same question that I asked Kim over to you, kind of just broadly speaking, where's your head at in terms of like where this market is at? And you wrote some really good pieces recently on kind of like, what's the future of retail audiology? What's the future of the hearing care professional?
I think that you're dead right. There's an explosion of augmented audio. Okay, I think that will lead to earlier adoption by people because they've been familiar with the idea of augmented audio from their headphones or from their TV or from whatever, right? I think the future for us lies in a more holistic approach to hearing care. Okay, and by that I mean offering solutions to consumers that they want, as opposed to that we want them to have.
Yeah.
So I think we need to have be really cognizant of these new innovations, these new technologies. We need to include them in our offerings, and that will be in different ways than perhaps we've ever done before. But we need to include them, and we need to offer this more holistic approach. I think we will be, or we could be, what we are supposed to be, and that is guides in the journey to hearing better. And up to now, have we really been guides in the journey to hearing better when our focus is on selling hearing aids? So, I think, to be honest with you, I think it's a good thing. I think it'll change how we practice, what we offer, and will move us towards being just that guides to hearing better.
Yeah.
Geoff, I use the term, I don't want to be the captain of someone's hearing journey because I think the patient needs to be the captain. I want to be the navigator.
Yeah, no, that's, and you know what, Kim, that is excellent analogy. You know, and it's exactly the way I'm thinking that the future will be, is that like we'll help them navigate the journey, like, but they will demand and want control of that journey. To now, really, what retail audiology has done is told them, this is the journey, suck it up.
Yeah, do it our way or no way. Our
Yeah.
way or no way. And I mean, Dave, I don't want to take over, but I do have a question
No
for
worries.
Geoff.
Go
I
for
mean,
it.
I would be very comfortable that I would have and I don't think I need to have clinic time for a DTC solution, but I could have an e-commerce store that I vetted all the products, that I could give you great descriptions of why and who they're good for. If I had a patient that was in my office that needed that solution, I would just direct them to my DTC store. And I would keep that very arm's length from my clinic operations.
Yeah, no, agreed. Like, agreed wholeheartedly. But that is exactly what we need to do. We need to adopt these technologies. We need to offer them. And for some people, it will make perfect sense. Like, and as you said, and just as I was saying, as a guide and a navigator to better hearing, who better to offer those products and to guide them through those different product offerings? Like, I think that if we don't, and this is the key, I think that if we don't do exactly as Kim has just said, that we'll no longer be relevant to consumers in their journey. And the future of technology and innovation that's happening right now eventually may preclude us from hearing aid sales. Like the AI, the artificial intelligence, the leaps forward in artificial intelligence right now is outstanding. Even the machine learning that's been undertaken by Widex and now by Signia through Widex.
Whisper.
Yeah, listen, Whisper, like it's endless, and it's really, really, really good stuff, and it's only going to get better. So, like, if we're not relevant to a consumer when they're considering a product, or they've started on their journey with a product, with the idea of augmented audio, how are we going to make ourselves relevant later on? It just won't happen.
And how are we going to not look self-serving?
Mm-hmm.
Well, I mean, up to now we've looked pretty self-serving,
yeah.
right?
Right.
So
right.
this is you make a really interesting point here, Kim. Okay, so let's use this example of these D2C items. Okay, so let's just say you have this $500 call it a Bose device, and that device can be bought at Best Buy, that device can be bought at Bose.com, and that device can be bought on your hearing shop, your little e-commerce attachment to your store. So then that begs the question, why would they go to you over these other things? And this is, I think, actually at the heart of where the opportunity really lies, is that you're the reason that people, whether it be a hearing aid, a DTC product, it's about you, right? It's about that navigator aspect of this, where it's not like you come in and like this is going to be the device for you. It's more of, let's really understand your hearing loss. And that might mean, you have to really start to convert your services into being much, much more conducive to meeting the consumers where they are, rather than just assuming you got to come into my clinic and see me and perform all these tests. You're just pushing people more toward Best Buy, where they don't have to do that. And they've done their own research and they've determined this is the device for me, or they even buy it direct from the manufacturer. So again, this is where, in my opinion, you have to figure out, like, how do you really kind of justify why people need to come and see you initially? And what does that look like? What does that experience look like? Because, I think, again, it goes back to this notion of, like, yes, the hardware and the solutions are changing, but the delivery model needs to change along with that too. The access to the care and all of the evaluation and your expertise, I think, needs to be made more accessible too.
Great. Yes. So I'll just speak. I'll be the American voice here for 2 seconds. And we do have some insurance involvement that is getting much, much more prolific than it used to be, that there's more and more coverage for this. So in the world, you have to be everything that DTC can't be. So I would have an e-commerce site. I would have a self-assessment on my own website. You can test your hearing, and then it could direct you to an e-commerce solution. If your hearing falls below, I like the adage of, I would do an online hearing test, a hearing handicap inventory, and something called Cedra, which is what does Cedra stand for? But it is a 10-question assessment of potentially otologic problems that would require medical intervention. If I had a patient that got greater than a moderate hearing handicap on all my self tools that they could do at home, are greater or greater than moderate hearing loss or failed Cedra, they need to come in. These are people, and I would have my website drive them to the reasons why they need to come in. If they pass all those things, then I would direct them to the links of the products that would be good for them. They don't have to come in, but if they want to come in, they can. And if they came in, we would do a communication and functional needs assessment that would be beyond the traditional audiometrics, that would be speech and noise and more detailed case histories and inventories. It would maybe include cognitive screening. It might include unaided real ear if they had a funky ear and I needed to know how to couple it. It might include a dexterity test to see what they can handle. It might include an auditory processing screening. It's going to include a lot of patient inventory and a lot of patient interview. And then at the end, you create a care plan that may or may not include a traditional hearing aid. It might still include an OTC or DTC solution. It might include implantable devices. It might just include accessories where they just really need TV ears, or they really need some auditory rehabilitation. But that's what we need to be offering, is really evaluating these folks as to what their comprehensive needs are. And I will take this opportunity that if any of my students or former students who listen to this know, if you do not have in your care plan some discussion of hearing protection, you are immediately going down 10 points on anything. We have got to do a better job of prevention and protection, and that should be part of every care plan.
I mean, talk about opportunity too.
Talk about opportunity. Hearing conservation.
I mean, yes. Seriously, it seems obvious to me that there's so many different professions out there that operate heavy machinery, loud machinery, people that are just exposed to high levels of noise for extended periods of time. It doesn't take long to really think through, okay, where are all the local businesses around me? Is that an opportunity? Should I go and start pitching myself to them and helping them to understand? Like, musicians are a great example. I would bet that a lot of musicians don't really even understand that, like, what a musician's earplug is it's actually a filter rather than it's like just occluding your hearing, and it's not going to really make the sound of the music any less. It's just going to turn the volume down. Like, there's so many things like that, it seems like.
Absolutely.
And so I guess, when I'm thinking through this, because I agree with you, I think, okay, so you have this thing on your website. Like I had that, I tagged you two on Twitter with DeWitt Swenpool. He had that chart where he showed, here's kind of the advantage of having an online hearing screener that works when you're not in your office, right? And I think that's another really fascinating aspect to this is these kinds of tools, they enable you to sort of operate in a sense, whether it be just the lead gen, like you said, Kim, where, maybe you don't even fail that and you get directed to, on something on your website here, you can buy that. So there's a little bit of a business opportunity, but for those people that maybe do fail it, and that warrants the next step, which is you need to now meet with me. What does this next step look like? Because I've been wondering this, like, okay, so we know now a little bit more about this patient. And again, this is a lot of people that are being captured online. So I know that there might be like licensure laws, like, because if they're out of state or whatever that might be. So again, this is a little American centric here, Geoff, but I'm curious, like the way in which in the absence, I guess, of, because it's obvious if they need to just come and see me in clinic, but again, let's think a little bit outside of the box here and think of what about those people that maybe aren't in the capacity to come and see you? Is there a way that you can facilitate, again, in this, something that highly differentiates you in an online setting of that, again, that next step?
I mean, yeah, I mean, here X have here X aren't the only ones, but basically they have a clinic in a box, right? You send it out to them. It's on a tablet, right? It's a clinically graded test. There's a video otoscope in the box. They shove it in their ears so you can see the ears, etc., etc., etc. I mean, they don't have to come into you anymore, right? And I mean, so, a lot of the argument, and there is, there's some substance in the argument. A lot of the argument is, well, simple AC, air conduction, pure tone audiometry doesn't really tell us enough for medical purposes or for the fitting of the hearing aids, right? Because if there's a conductive element there and you just put in AC results, you're not getting the right output, right? So, but the thing is that 90% of people who wander through your door have just simple sensory neural hearing loss. So, we've started to move forward with things to address the possibility where there's medical issues, like, as Kim said, the Cedra. Here X have thrown in, as I said, a very easy to use VO. They shove it in their own ear, and it clearly shows if there's wax or if there's a problem on the eardrum or if there's perhaps fluid in the middle ear, etc., etc. I think, though, although it may well come in the future whereby you can either do an online test or some sort of remote setup test like that will actually give full clinically validated results that are safe or that we feel really comfortable with in relation to medical referrals and stuff. Like, I think they're coming. There's a difference in the growth of loudness between people who have conductive elements and people who don't, right? And surely there's smarter people out there than me considering how they can use that to offer an online test that will flag up some sort of conductive issue.
Geoff, so you've been an audiologist a long time. You know good and well that if you see an audiogram that has poor hearing in the lows or is some flat moderate, that it's probably conductive or has some semblance of a conductive component.
Conductive elements, yeah.
I mean, you don't need bone. You don't need to, I mean, looking in the ear is the one thing that's the hardest thing for me to let go of, but I've let go of it. You know that it's either wax or it's some semblance of some degree of a conductive component. So to get all caught up in, not you, but for our colleagues who just get all caught up in, oh, this is so bad and so dangerous, I'm just sorry. I think it's more dangerous to not treat hearing loss.
Right. I mean, seriously, especially with all of the research that's coming out with, and again, I always have to preface this. I know that causation does not equal correlation, but I'm just saying there seems to be a lot of links to a lot of very detrimental health risks around your brain if you live with hearing loss for an extended period of time, especially knowing that it tends to be progressive hearing loss. It gets worse.
And I want to add in about Duet and the folks at HearX. This is science, research-based products and software and tests. These are not fly-by-night people. These are academics who have created a product based upon their research.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, their stuff is outstanding.
Outstanding, yes.
Always thought their stuff was outstanding. From the first time I got a hold of their original VO, and then like started to play a little bit with their online testing process and stuff like that. Say the stuff is outstanding, and like it's not, as you said, some fly by night rubbish, right? And 90, as I said, 90% of people have just simple sensory neural hearing loss. Full stop. Like, so, the argument that, oh well, online tests can mix some of the medical problems. Yeah, it can. But to be honest with you, 90% of the time, that won't fucking matter. Because there won't be any medical problems. So where do you go from that? And I think that's really what I've seen, consistently in all the years I've been involved with this business. This obstinate refusal to adopt or move forward.
We're doctors, Geoff. We're doctors.
Like, I mean, the only reason we can even talk about remote care, right, is because of the fucking zombie epidemic.
Yeah.
If the zombie epidemic hadn't happened, right, nobody would be adopting remote care. There'd still be 20% of clinics adopting remote care. So, I mean, and consumers want that. Consumers are busy. They have lives to lead. They don't want to be driving to your practice, waiting in your waiting room, coming into your clinic room. Okay, some of them do. Some of them actually enjoy it, and that's part of the reason why we are the care and service industry. But many of them don't, and they would rather you use the tools that are available for you to do remote stuff with them.
Yeah, you touched on something there that I wanted to mention. So, Kim, I heard you on a podcast. It was Life Aloud. It's Jason Wiggins' podcast.
Yeah.
This is an awesome podcast, by the way. So shout out, check this podcast out. But I was doing a little research. I was like, okay, searching for, I do this. I look at my guests to see like, are you on any recent podcasts so I can just gather some more information? And you said something fascinating on that podcast. You said that it takes start to finish 7.5 hours to get a hearing aid on average, in terms of like, you start by setting that first appointment and it takes that much time to walk out with something. And again, this is like, these are the opportunities, in my opinion, is can you cut that down? Can you make that more efficient?
You could cut that down a lot if you would do a lot more remote evaluation or remote follow-up, especially. That's the low-hanging fruit. But think about it. Most of us are going to make sure that we get there, between 0 to 15 minutes before our appointment. So in order to do that, in almost any place in the United States, no matter where it is, unless it's next door to you, you're going to need to leave 30 minutes beforehand in order to get there. So you're going to have to drive or walk to get to where, or take the train or whatever it is to get to where you're going. You get there early. So we're now 45 minutes that we've sucked up and we haven't seen anybody. And then we see someone takes 30 minutes to an hour, and then you got to go back the other direction. That's still attached to that visit, the time to go home or go back to work, because it's time that you can't do anything else. You're going to have to take time off work. Think about if you're an hourly employee, you're literally missing getting paid. Or if you have PTO, you're taking away from vacation time. And you've got to do that typically 3 to 4 times before acceptance. You might be able to be fit if they have stock RICs. You might be able to be fit that day of that evaluation. But typically you're going, especially if insurance is involved, because you're going to have an invoice with the patient's name on it, you're going to have to come back. And again, you're going to have another hour to 2 hours in that visit as well. And then follow-ups. Almost everyone that I talk to wants 2 follow-ups or is requiring 2 follow-ups in that evaluation and adjustment period. Yeah, I did the math and it got to like 7.5 hours. Who wants to do that? I don't want to do that.
And let me
I would
ask you,
never do
so
that.
with those follow-ups, what exactly is going on? Is there any reason you need to be in clinic for that? Are you doing any types of tests or anything like that? This is my own naivety. I'm just curious.
Can I be honest? If it was me, it depends on the situation. And Geoff, please just step in. Sometimes you are literally doing nothing because the patient's completely happy. I could have found that out to have myself or my staff person either do a telehealth visit, text them, email them, or call them and find out if they needed to come back. I didn't necessarily have to schedule them to come back. But people, if you tell them they need to come for follow-up, they're going to come for follow-up. And do some people need to come back? Yes. Does everyone need to come back? No. But we make everyone come back. It's one size fits all.
Yeah.
And it's our protocol. It's our standard of care. This is why we see them all the time. So this is why we're better. That's just bullshit. I don't know. You see them all the time because you feel like, I've had more than one person tell me this, that if they're not with you, they're unhappy or they're somewhere with someone else. Who cares?
Mm-hmm.
Are they happy? And if you do why don't I just send them a hearing handicap inventory or an AFAB or a COSI that they did before and see if they're if things are better? Why don't I ask them in a survey? Why don't I give them 3 questions, a smiley face and a text? There's all sorts of ways that I can ask them if things are okay and not have to see them. And if things are okay, they don't need to come in.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, no, appointments for fucking no reason are appointments for fucking no reason.
For no reason.
I mean? And as Kim said, you have to treat every patient differently because every patient is different. They all have different wants. They all have different needs. They all have different acoustical needs. And you have to treat them like that. So it's arbitrary. But what's happened is that, nobody has unbundled, right? So everybody feels they have to justify the price that they are charging, okay? And how they justify the price that they are charging is based on FaceTime. That's what it's based on. In-person FaceTime, okay? And some people, you know what? Some people need that in-person FaceTime. They really badly need it. But for a lot of people, like, say, Steve Claridge, right? My business partner and the other editor and author on Hearing Aid Now, right? Steve Claridge has been wearing hearing aids since he was 13 years of age. He knows more about fucking hearing aids than somebody just sign up. You know what I mean? He doesn't need 5 follow-up visits.
Yeah.
Steve needs you to fit his hearing aids well, get them to Target, give him an app where he has complete control over the acoustic output, right? And he'll be ecstatic. And he'll turn up every now and again when the receiver fails. So if I'm dealing with Steve, right, what's my justification for charging the same price for Steve's hearing aids that I'm charging Doris, who's in with me every 3 or 4 weeks because she forgets how to change the wax guards, mm-hmm. or she wants a chat? Do you know what I mean? And that's one of the things that I think this industry has struggled with for so long. And the answer has always been bundle prices. I think the future is not going to be gentle to that business model. Up to now, the technology and innovation that's happened within hearing aids has actually conspired to keep the business model as is, to protect it, right? And I said that in my article. I don't mean that, there's been a great conspiracy. There hasn't. What's happened is the direction of innovation and technology has just really ensured that hearing aids stay within the current model, right? And listen, that's changing. That is really changing. Mm-hmm. The innovation and technology outside of the hearing aid world, what's happening there, and combined with some of the innovation and technology changes that are happening within the hearing aid world, are shaking up and loosening the protection of the existing business model. If I can have a set of hearing aids fitted to me and then use the AI on my hearing aid app to fine tune them moving forward in the moment, right? Why do I need to go and see you? Like, why do I need to go and see you? And I think that's, I said that to somebody and they're like, I had somebody in and, and I had to, and they were fit this and I just had to fit in. No supercomputer is going to do that. And I was like, yeah, right.
And so Geoff, this is that exact story about Steve is why I became passionate about unbundling in the 1990s, and why I've been on this unbundling bandwagon in the United States now. It's almost been 15 years. But again, people just, it's going to cost me, I'm going to lose money. It's not about the patient. It's always, I'm going to lose money, or it's not good for the patient. I'm like, always, my answer is, I put my academic hat on. Can you please show me the evidence of that? Do you have evidence to support that statement? Because the bottom line is we don't have evidence to support a lot of stuff that comes out of people's mouth. That we're better. Show me where our outcomes are better. Show me. And I'll support you if you can show me, but you can't. And I'll be the elephant in the room. There is a force that is in this industry that is socialized and conditioned almost like occult leaders do to believe that unbundling is bad and change is bad and all these new entrants are junk and you are better. You're so special. Patients have to have you. And if blah, 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 and they believe it, everybody believes it. And they believe that over data. They believe that over the writing on the wall in terms of what the consumer electronics industry, and then they ignore the stuff that the industry is doing internally. They ignore what they're doing because they're protecting us. That's just bullshit.
You're dead right. Like, this idea of that change isn't going to happen or we're too special for change to affect us. It's just rubbish. Like, and I was talking about Lexi Hearing, right? And now listen, Lexi Hearing, they're into phonics, right? I mean, there's nothing special about it. All right, there isn't, right? And but they're fairly, they're okay, basic, decent hearing aids, right? I tell you what's special about Lexi Hearing, right? Lexi Hearing is just a platform, right? The consumer journey, the onboarding, and the customer service that they offer is fucking outstanding, right? Now, Lexi are really, really intelligent with what they've done. They're doing this, and that's what they focused on, right? And the hearing aid product is just a hearing aid product, right?
Yeah.
Lexi could decide tomorrow, right, to sell phonic hearing aids.
Yeah.
Or resound hearing aids. Or
right. The hardware isn't really what makes it important.
Exactly.
No.
Right. And actually, what they focused on, the consumer journey, the benefit to the consumer, right, the onboarding, are the things that are the biggest threat to us in retail audiology.
Well, let me actually play a little bit of devil's advocate here, because I actually think that the gamification element of Lexi is one of the most interesting innovations I think to have transpired here recently. This idea that you actually get rewarded for wearing your hearing aids, and it's a little shop and you get little things and little perks, but I think that it actually is on to something much, much bigger, which is, and this is what I wanted to ask you too, is like, okay, so hearing aids are, and these in-the-ear devices, all of them, they're so interesting from a telehealth standpoint because they're little computers, so they can get a lot of data. And so when we talk about like this, vision of what the future might look like, where you're more of this navigator, you're more of kind of consulting them and guiding them through their hearing loss journey. What's fascinating to me about something like Lexi, and I know like Starkey has a little bit of this too with their Livio platform, but this idea that as the provider, you would actually have insight into their usage data that you can then use, like Kim, you've been talking about the inventories, the questionnaires, the surveys. You can augment that even further, I think, to really get an understanding of like, okay, here's where I struggle. And you can see the log of the data to see, okay, at 3 p.m. when he said that he was in this restaurant, this is what it looked like. And so it's arming you, I think, with a whole lot more information that, again, just it positions you as, I can make sense of this for you. The consumer is largely not going to probably be the one that's going to be making sense of it. It's either going to be the system itself, but more likely, I think that it's this idea of almost being a data coach where you're really kind of using that to understand, like, here's actually what I'm seeing from a performance standpoint. And that might be the big opportunity is, again, in this model, if it's very much online. And another thing that we didn't really even mention with how many time savings there can be for the patient, there's a lot of time savings for the clinician too. So you can see so many more people.
Yes.
And so what is this all kind of building toward? Well, maybe this model in the future looks a lot more like, I sell this device to you at cost. Maybe there's a little bit of a markup, but I'm going to sell you the device. And then where I get compensated is for the navigation piece, right? This idea of like, 2 weeks from now, we'll meet and we'll kind of discuss what that first 2 weeks has been like. And I know that this is already sort of what a lot of people do, but I'm saying apply it in this more like online oriented world that allows for so many efficiencies from a time standpoint.
So Dave, I have a client in the US that actually does dispense their hearing aids at cost. And the patient actually walks away with the invoice.
Interesting.
For everything, for repairs, for ear molds, and then it is 100% service-driven pricing, full transparency. It was very, very important to them that when we created their pricing, that we created a pricing model that was fully transparent. This was something that they it was philosophical, something that was very important to them. And so imagine a world where I'm a big fan of the patient interview and really asking them a lot of questions and listening. Like, I ask questions and I listen back. And then imagine if you can add data to that. Like, you're telling me in your average day, you're struggling in this meeting, and now you have data that goes with it. Oh, maybe we need a table mic. Maybe we need a Roger. Maybe I need to come to your meeting and experience it myself. I used to do that all the time in my implant world when I saw patients. I would go with my implant patients and they paid me for my time for situations that were difficult so that I could just sit and take notes and go, okay, this is how you need to approach this moving forward. And create an auditory rehabilitation plan for these folks that's not about the widget. It's about, what do you need to support your brain and your peripheral hearing and your widget in order to maximize your communication. And there's a lot around that that's not about the hearing aid. And I work at Northwestern. Audiology was founded at Northwestern post-World War II as an auditory rehabilitation of hearing loss. It was rehabilitation of hearing loss. That's what audiology is about, really. And we've lost sight of that. We've completely lost sight of, this is who we really are, rehabilitationists and not salespeople.
But you know what you were just talking about there, and Dave, sorry, going back to what you were saying, like, sell the device and actually 2 weeks later come back, right? Unitron built a whole ecosystem around that concept, right?
Flex, right?
Yeah, using the Flex trial, right? Using the app with the instant feedback, using all of those things, right? And nobody used it. Now, in fairness, right? a lot of the time, it kind of pushed people towards stopping around hearing aids. No surprise, right?
Right.
Right.
I love his laugh so much.
His laugh's amazing.
It delivered really good data, and it delivered data that you could, as a clinician, begin to make some decisions upon and begin to make some outlines on. I mean, that's what we're supposed to do. I was saying when we were talking earlier before the podcast started, I had a patient just yesterday, and I did a quick SIN, and the scores were dreadful. And that framed how I was going to talk about a solution for this person. And with the problem areas that we had discussed in depth, what I advised was a Rogers Select IM and a set of Paradise hearing aids, because that's what she really needed. Her speech to scream was pretty bad. Her speech to scream in quiet was pretty bad, let alone in noise. And I had to tell this lady, listen, doesn't matter how much you spend on hearing aids, they aren't really going to do the job. They will help, but they aren't going to deliver anywhere where what you would like. However, if you couple a Rogers Select with them in those particular areas, family areas that you were really concerned about, that it will help. It will help. And that's a hard conversation to have, right? But if we don't have the data, if I didn't have the data to have that conversation, if I didn't understand her needs, if I didn't understand her abilities, right? Well, then you're not having the right conversation. You're not giving them the right recommendation. And that's what we're fucking supposed to do.
Yes. Amen. That's what makes audiologists audiologists. It's not, can I shove a widget on your ear?
Yeah, people are so protective about, audiologists and some are rightly, because they offer a service and they offer a really, really good service. They do those in-depth tests that give them an understanding. They listen to the patient and then they talk about solutions, right? But a solution just doesn't include a hearing aid. And sometimes a solution won't include a hearing aid. And I think that's what we need to get our head around. And I think the reason why most people are afraid of that, and they're afraid of offering this kind of holistic hearing approach, right, is because how am I going to make it pay?
Right. That's the crux of it all.
Yeah, but I find that really irritating. I'm a successful doctor, and how am I going to make it pay? Work it fucking out. That's your fucking job. Work it fucking out. Do you know what I mean? You're supposed to be a businessman or woman. Work it out. I don't know. And, and that's where I take my hat off to Kim, right? Kim has laid it out. Recent article laid it out. This is how you can make money, right? And, thank you, Kim, for that, right? But why should she have to? You know what I mean? Why should she have to? People should be smart enough to work it out themselves. So that's my rant for today.
I love your rants. No, I think that what it boils down to is that, you can't, I think this is one of the biggest struggles that this industry sort of grapples with is, you don't want to be perceived as a salesman. However, your entire business model is dependent on the sale of hearing aids, right? And for by and large, I mean, some hearing aid professionals are in certain settings where it's not as much of a, kind of like a success factor, I guess. But by and large, I think that, it's always been this way, where it's like, this is how you generate revenue. And this is always sort of what existed. And this is what people know.
But David, always hasn't been this way. Prior to 1978, audiologists in the US made their money off of care. That's how it worked. And there are many successful audiology practices in this country that do not provide hearing aids.
Yeah.
I always go to Dr. Ferry, Jeanne Ferry here in Chicago. Jeanne specializes in auditory processing. She doesn't even see adults. She doesn't take any insurance, and she probably has a waiting list of 7 weeks and doesn't dispense hearing aids.
Yeah.
I have a client in California, vestibular clinic. They do not dispense hearing aids. There are, not tinnitus clinics do, but that's not real. I know many tinnitus clinics that dispense hearing aids, but only to their tinnitus patients.
Yeah. No, I agree with you. I think that there's, this is like, if we can figure this out by and large as an industry, that's awesome. Like if we really do have it be something that's much more tied to your expertise and your service, like most medical professionals, then I think that this industry is going to be in a great position, because again, it goes back to the beginning of the conversation.
So much opportunity.
If you operate off the assumption that this is a big time growing pie, and so you don't need to necessarily fixate on this idea that like, well, now suddenly my, like existing patients are going to go and they're going to buy these OTC self-assessment things. Some might, but the fact of the matter is that there's going to be a whole lot more people that are at least the barriers of entry are getting kind of reduced to rubble in many regards. And so I think that if you sort of operate off this mindset of like, this is a growing pie, growing industry, lots more people potentially that want to access my services. Again, this kind of goes back to the beginning of like, how do you make these services more accessible? And then how do you sort of pivot to a way in which you're compensating for the, kind of the depreciating revenue from the hearing aid sales to this new, more service-oriented model? And it goes back to probably having to unbundle, having to, like really start to itemize, like, here's what my billable hour is, and here's how much these things cost, and being able to justify it through, again, I'm not here to sell you a device. I'm here to help navigate you through this traumatic period of your life and to give you a semblance of like, everything that you're losing from your debilitating hearing loss for some, and helping them to navigate this as best as they possibly can. That seems to be the obvious answer, and there's facets of it.
So Dave, I have a business plan that I still may execute when I decide that and the business plan is that I wouldn't dispense any hearing aids. And so I would do communication needs assessments, and I would have an e-commerce store. And if I got to the point, I wouldn't have admittance either. If I got to the point that I needed admittance, I need a referral. If I would have I wouldn't do medical. I would just do communication needs assessments of children and adults. And then I would have an e-commerce store for the folks that wanted to get amplification direct to themselves. I would have the hearing test online. I would have Cedra. I would have an inventory. I would build a back end to that e-commerce store. I'd have it fulfilled by someone other than me, and I would just do communication needs assessments when I felt like it, so that I can partially retire and I can work when I feel like it. And if you cash flow it, let's say I did 4 of them a day, 5 days a week, and I would do them any time of day. Yeah. I would be more of a concierge open business. And what that means is, if you want me to see you at 8 o'clock at night, I'll see you at 8 o'clock at night. I don't care. But let's say I do 4 a day, 5 days a week. And it wouldn't have to be Monday through Friday. It could be Saturday or Sunday, whatever. Let's say that's how many I do. 4 a day, 20 a week at $250. That's $5,000 a week. And I didn't sell anything. Mm-hmm. Didn't sell anything. And let's say I did that 40 weeks a year. That's $200,000, and my overhead was probably minimal.
Yeah. Right. It's so feasible, it seems like. I mean, and again, It goes back to this notion of like, if you're really willing to take it upon yourself to do these things, whether it be, I need to redesign my website, I need to include a hearing screener, embed that on there, I need to add an e-commerce store, like you said, I need to make it so that I can facilitate these it's not as if your patients are unaccustomed to Zoom calls. As Geoff mentioned, the pandemic ushered in a lot of new norms. And so your patients probably going to be very comfortable with like an online consultation like this. Even if it's a step one, it just seems like, again, that 7.5 hour time to get a hearing aid is like, okay, if you can cut that in half, that there are so many implications of that.
And I can make money while I'm sleeping.
Exactly.
The way I would pitch it to the profession is so a good, established, scientifically based online screener, right, is a triage. It actually saves them time and money because it makes sure that chair time is protected, right? And by that I mean every time somebody sits in your chair, right, as a business, you really need to be making revenue. You know, that type of triage system makes sense. Do you know what I mean? It makes sense for everybody. It makes sense for the consumer. It makes sense financially for the business.
Yeah, no, I totally agree with you, Geoff. Kim, Geoff, I think that this has just been a wonderful conversation. Lots to unpack, lots to think about. But I think that the moral of this conversation is that, you know, there are a lot of opportunities. And I think that there's a really optimistic way to look at things. Again, off this idea that this is a growing pie. So I'm sure this won't be the last time we chat, but until next time, thanks for everybody who tuned in here to the end, and we will chat with you next time. Cheers. Thanks for tuning in today. I hope you enjoyed this episode of Future Ear Radio. For more content like this, just head over to futureear.co, where you can read all the articles that I've been writing these past few years on the worlds of voice technology and hearables and how the two are beginning to intersect. Thanks for tuning in, and I'll chat with you next time.